All right. Okay, before we head to Dayton for our Potter's House meeting in Dayton, we're going to do a quick little video here. Getting sent a lot of great information by readers, and another one caught my interest, and we will discuss that shortly. For several years now, we've been throwing a lot of ideas out there because I think our ministry is unique, okay?
Definitely different.
Yeah, and our message is just not out there everywhere. So the question is, of course we've been heavily involved in the internet and all that drama. The question has been, as we keep throwing these ideas out there, what's the best way to get our message out? And we wait for people to respond to our ideas, and the Bible Institute is the one that's really getting traction that people are excited about. So basically, this is very freeing because we can make our focus education and not getting involved in all of the drama that's out on the blogosphere with all the discernment blogs and everything. Education. So, second to that, we need to, I think we've also found out that we need to take this message to the people, okay? And as far as the Bible Institute and taking this message to people, we appreciate your help. All right, last year, the Louisville project, when we went down and evangelized the Calvinist youth at the Cross Conference, was very productive and very interesting. Now, we had planned on doing the same thing with pastors at the Vine Conference in Minneapolis, and there were two things that hindered us. We didn't get the financial support that we got for Louisville, and there were weather issues. And I think of what we were afraid of is that because the trip would have been on a shoestring budget, if I got stranded up there because of winter, I still may, or the kind of things that was going on up there with the weather, I could still be there.
Walking back to Ohio.
So, for those who are interested in donating to these causes, we're going to have a lot of information about the Bible Institute. Also, I think it comes down, is basically what I'm saying here, is we're going to get more away from the computer and take the message to the people, and I'm going to be more able to do that now because we have a moderator with the blog, and the blog can be kept going while I'm doing other things, and that is just major. That is a major turning point in this ministry. Then we've got some people showing interest in doing guest articles, like Andy did one last week. So with a moderator and people willing to be a guest writer, perhaps we could actually add official authors to the blog, like the Gospel Coalition blog has 15 authors or something. I don't know.
Go there.
Yeah. So I doubt we'll be able to get that many on our authors, and I don't think I'd want that many, but 2 or 3, okay, that are on the same page. So basically, If you want to donate to the next cross conference we are going to
Oh.
in Indianapolis, we discussed this. In Indianapolis, it'll be again in between Christmas and New Year's. I believe that it's going to be the same date, only in Indianapolis. Again, like Louisville, conveniently 2.5 hours from here. All right. I'll repost the information from Louisville from last year. Although, if you want to know a little bit about what went on in Louisville, you might try 7questions.org. Okay? That's the number 7questions.org. I believe that's the address. And we may have all of the videos of the interviews. That was a great ministry. We'll be doing more than that. So basically, we're going to start getting more away from the computer and out into the streets, okay? If you want to donate to these causes, it's a little bit early on the Bible Institute, not so early on the newsletter we're going to start putting out, okay? Because how did the new Calvinist movement get launched? Present Truth magazine. Just, okay. Basically, a newsletter, a monthly newsletter, okay? We're talking a monthly newsletter attached to the Bible Institute. That's going to be a little bit sooner probably than the Institute. And the Institute will be mobile. We're thinking crash courses here at the Potter's House on the weekend. And then if people want to invite us out to do a seminar, no problem. But the cross conference coming up in Indianapolis in December, Tank, T-A-N-C, P.O. Box 583, Xenia, Ohio, 45385. We are taking donations for that trip. We are also taking donations for Tank 2015. The annual Tank Conference 2015. We've never spoken like this before, but I guess, I'd look at what all these heretics are getting paid out in the blogosphere and whatnot. If we think we have the truth, and we think that we're doing a valued education process here, I don't think we need to be ashamed to ask. But the 2014 conference was tight. Actually, a little beyond tight. Okay, and again, Tank, T-A-N-C, P.O. Box 583. Xenia, Ohio 45385. Earmark where you want the money to go, and it'll be set aside. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, with that said, let's talk about my temptation to make a little bit of hay out of all of this information people are sending me. I got an email linking me to an article, okay, and the email says, when books are written against J.C. Ryle, you know they are on the wrong track. Okay, well, what have we learned from John Emmel starting in 2012 from the first conference? Let me put it simply. People do what they do for a reason. Logic, when people do something, it's driven by logic. Okay? So, why are they coming out against J.C. Ryle? I'm just going to cut to the quick here. J.C. Ryle was a brilliant man, but your traditional half-pregnant Protestant. Okay? J.C. Ryle, for the most part, like Dr. J. Adams is a grammarian. What do I mean by that? Words mean things. J.C. Ryle interpreted the Bible not literally, grammatically. Okay? Taking genre into consideration, taking history into consideration, but for the most part, what's the meaning of how these words are arranged in this sentence and in context, various and sundry context. When the biblical authors were writing to the people of that day, what did that mean to those people? Okay? So, that's their problem with J.C. Ryle. As I noted in the first book that I wrote, Another Gospel, the New Antinomians and Their Gospel-Driven Doctrine, this is before people recognized, or this ministry connected the dots to the present-day New Calvinist movement going back to the Australian Forum. People were really groping for a label to put on this movement. Nobody knew where it came from, what it was that they really believed. I mean, I had fairly well-known evangelicals calling me and saying, we can't figure out where they get this stuff. We know they didn't pull it out of thin air. There's no new thing under the sun. Where did this come from? Okay? Well, now we know. But during that time, we called it gospel sanctification. And in my book, I'm not sure what chapter, looks like chapter 2 maybe. Yeah, chapter 2 of the book, Another Gospel. I have 2 essays in here about J.C. Ryle's contention about a doctrine during his day that is, to a T, New Calvinism, to a T, authentic Protestant soteriology. Now, here we have J.C. Ryle, an Anglican, I believe, which would be very much from the Reformed tradition, really coming out against authentic Protestant soteriology. Okay? Basically, more than likely, what J.C. Ryle was contending against was the Kiswick movement, or the Higher Life movement, which was one of the resurgences of the authentic Reformation gospel. Okay? This is very much in the same way J.E. Adams, a staunch Calvinist, came out against sonship theology in the latter 90s. Well, hello. The Acts 29, sonship theology, et al., all came out of the Australian Forum, which in fact did rediscover the lost Reformation gospel. Okay, why was it lost? Because people naturally interpret reality grammatically. Okay, the Reformers didn't interpret reality that way. They made the cross an epistemology. Okay, they had a huge problem because they were Gnostics. You got God coming as material man, and he's absolutely holy. Whoa, that just turned all the philosophy of that day completely on its head. So gee whiz, what do? We know because Luther equated everything material with works, works of men. No matter how good it looks, it's of the material realm.
And evil.
The flesh realm. It's got to be evil. even if some Boy Scout saves a little old lady from getting run over by a Mack truck, okay, that can't be a good work. It's of the material world. Okay, this is the reformers. Okay, so basically you have Jesus Christ turning the whole ancient spiritual caste system completely on his head by coming to earth as God and man. I mean, he just turned the whole thing completely upside down. Okay, but I digress, of course. All right, so basically in my book, okay, you've got J.C. Ryle contending against one of the Reformation resurgencies in the higher life movement, Kiswick movement, and this is why the New Calvinist in our day, particularly D.A. Carson, is infatuated with the Kiswick movement. This is why. Oh, look, we're writing about it and we're articulating it, this doctrine. It must not have anything to do with us. And they do this deliberately so that people can't connect the dots. Lord willing, Volume 2, we connect these dots. We document all of the Reformed resurgences. Okay? So basically what you have here is J.C. Ryle wrote the holiness. I think 20 letters on holiness and sanctification. Okay, and basically you have the same thing with Dr. J.E. Adams' book on sonship theology. It's the same thing. A Calvinist who really doesn't understand where Luther and Calvin were coming from. Okay, so that's in the book, Another Gospel, and I have 2 essays in here, and I document how J.C. Ryle's contention against the higher life movement is a point by point rebuttal against the same New Calvinist doctrine that we see today, point by point. It's the exact same thing. So that answers your question why they have to criticize J.C. Ryle. Now, after I published this book and wrote a lot of articles about J.C. Ryle, what people tried to do, particularly Calvinists, was take bits and pieces of things that J.C. Ryle has said in his writings and said, see, J.C. Ryle was a modern day New Calvinist, okay? Kind of like, Chad Bresson's address at the one conference where he said Stephen was actually a proponent of New Covenant theology, okay? So that kind of thing, okay? So, but no, J.C. Ryle, like all people cut from the Reformed tradition, is going to be to a point confused. Okay, and the reason he was confused is because he was a grammarian. No doubt he was a grammarian, but he was in bed with a tradition that was Gnostic in its interpretation of reality. This is the bottom line, and that's why we're going to look at this article. Okay, so what is this article? You have a copy there, and some things are highlighted, and it is an article by Trevor Waxon, okay, I believe, very popular in Southern Baptist circles, highly regarded in Southern.
Wax, W-A-X.
What is it again?
Trevin Wax.
Trevin Wax. Okay, he's an egregious false teacher. Okay, like most of these guys. Okay, so he writes this article, and again, because of the lack of education and the deliberate attempt by the Reformation to dumb down the herd, the Christian herd. Here's what he does, and this is what all of these guys do. What is sanctification? A process or position. He's setting the agenda for interpretation. Okay? No. See, that's not the question. Here's the question. Okay? Here's the question. The real question is sanctification completely separate from justification? All right? Or are they never separate but distinct? Okay? What do they mean by that, Paul? Well, never separate, the golden chain of salvation, but distinct. Well, in what way distinct, Paul? Is it a process or a position? Okay? Now, blah, 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 over and over and over again in the article. Okay? Quote, but I find it helpful to simplify the discussion as a way of facilitating further conversation among pastors and counselors who generally want to see people growing in holiness and yet disagree as to the best way to biblically motivate them to obedience. Okay, hello, it's been over 2,000 years since the New Testament's been out there in one shape, form, or another. We're still discussing this? Really? Okay. Read the New Testament. Elders and the apostles were continually haggling about the best way to be sanctified? I don't think so. Okay? Well, if the Apostle Paul was definitive, if James was definitive, if all of these guys were obviously very definitive about how God's people are sanctified, why are we having this discussion 2,000 years later? Well, here's why. The golden chain of salvation. When justification and sanctification are fused together, total confusion is the absolute result. Why? Because when justification and sanctification are fused together, everything's a work. Okay? Justification is a process. Okay? Now, what they do in here, they do their usual metaphysical two-step. No, sanctification isn't a process. It's a position. Well, and as you meditate on the position, the process is manifested by the Spirit. Okay? So he's giving an either-or choice here, process or position. But what he's really doing in his answer is reversing the two. You see that? Okay. Now look. This goes back to the exact same metaphysical two-stepping that the first century church fought against in the very beginning, okay? J.C. Ryle in his writings on sanctification mentioned the antinomian controversy of I believe, the 17th century with Dell in town and a smart or Saltmesh or whatever his name was. I think I'm probably getting those names wrong. But the way those guys spoke in nuance and doublespeak drove J.C. Ryle absolutely nuts. And he talks about that. And I cite it in the book. It's the same, thing. Total confusion. Trevor Wax, if I'm getting that name right. Oh, yes, let's continue the discussion. And here's an idea you can get here, da-da-da-da-da-da. In the meantime, just trust us, okay? Treat us well, okay? keep sending your money, okay? And of course, when you get back to what Calvin wrote, okay, you know, if your local Reformed elder likes you, you're in. Because whatever they bind on earth is bound in heaven, and whatever they loose on earth is loosed in heaven. So basically, in the final analysis, if your local Reformed pastor likes you, you're in. Okay? So that's the first point here. What is sanctification, a process or position? That's not the question. He's setting the wrong premise. His premise is erroneous and completely foundless. The real question is sanctification completely separate from justification? In J.E. Adams' book, Against Sonship Theology, J.E. Adams, a staunch Calvinist, says unequivocally, yes, sanctification is completely separate from justification. Now, my concern with J.E. Adams and INS today, they have yahoos like Lou Perillo or whatever, however you pronounce his name, yes, they are separate, but, they still have to be connected. It's the same old thing where that sanctification is powered from justification to some point. And him and David Pallison both have attempted this metaphysical two-step where they say, oh, yes, sanctification is powered from justification, but that's not the whole enchilada. Okay, there's other factors, and away they go. And by the time you're done reading their nonsense, you're so confused, oh well, they must have it right, and you go on, okay?
Can you hand me your ink pen here, because I need to, first of all, this article is, I believe, a review of David Peterson's book, Possessed by God.
Right.
So these are comments by Trevin Wax about
Right.
David Peterson's book, Possessed by God. But he actually says here, about what Peterson says. Peterson admits that sanctification can be conceived as a process, but he argues, if you go down, that it is a status bestowed on us at conversion. So he has already connected sanctification to justification here. Peterson does. So he's already fused it together there.
Right. And here's how they do it. Okay, here's how they get around this. Okay, so he goes on, he set the wrong premise. Whether it's a process or a position isn't the question. And even though he gives an either or process or position, he utilizes both to make his point.
Just like Piper did last week.
Right. Yes, it's a position only, but the process that you see is done by the Holy Spirit. So it is a process. It's just not done by us. Now, if he wanted to be honest, he would have said, it's both, but we don't do the process. We only observe or experience the process. And he says that. Okay? So, all right. Watch this. He gives us links here, and he says it's a good contribution. We have another good contribution. This is a good contribution to the discussion. Why are we having the discussion? Okay? There was no confusion in the New Testament about how believers are sanctified. All right? So, it's a good contribution to the ongoing discussion on the nature of sanctification and the pastoral wisdom, okay, of knowing where to put emphasis, notice I have that circled, underlined, when discipling believers, okay? Then a little bit further down, he warns against, that is Peterson, focusing. He changes emphasis for focus now. We're talking about a focus. Okay? More on the process than the position. Why? Because we're to focus on the position, and the process happens apart from us. I'll get to that later. This is what he's not being honest about, because he's a lying heretic, false prophet, teacher, okay? Because such an approach can actually work against the progress that a believer wants to what? Experience. There's that word experience there. Notice the goal of the believer is to experience. Okay? The experience. Now, we see more of this in articles of confusion. Okay? And I got them all over the place here. Here's the article about Rachel Held Evans taking her ball and going home because World Vision initially allowed homosexuals to work there, okay, and they reversed their prior policy, allowed same-sex married couples to work there, and then reversed their position. She was originally for it, okay, thought it was a great decision, and then when they reversed it, she got all in a tizzy and took her ball and went home. Rachel Held Evans leaves evangelicalism following World Vision's gay marriage controversy. Why are evangelicals, and see, when you learn about all of this world philosophy stuff and the stuff John Emmel teaches, okay, you see so much of this stuff in the New Testament. This kind of continually drama in the New Testament church is what Paul addressed, the exact same thing Paul addressed to Timothy when he said, don't get tangled up in the affairs of the world. Why are we all tangled up in the latest evangelical drama? Okay? Because we have to figure out, okay, how to live by faith alone in the middle of this chain. And it's just total confusion. Okay? So, basically, listen to what one of the premier evangelicals of our day, considered to be a biblicist, considered to be on the cutting edge of sound doctrine, Russell D. Moore, another Southern Baptist, okay, he's mentioned in the article as saying, I think World Vision made the right decision. And here's what you get with these institutions, okay? It's an institution. It's spiritual caste. They made a decision for some political reason or financial reason, waited, put their finger in the air, called their accountant, and depending on which way donations were coming or going, they made decisions accordingly. Okay? It's the same thing ABWE did with the missionary kids. When your whole institution is founded on a icon like, what's his name? Ketchum, okay? You got to protect that icon. It's an institutional situation. So anyway, he said, yada yada, they made the right decision. Russell D. Moore, president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, said on Twitter that World Vision has, quote, has done the right thing, okay? Quote, now let's all work for a holistic gospel presence. Okay? What in the Yahoo is a holistic gospel presence?
That's a new one. We
Well,
should put that on our list.
experience, gospel presence. He's saying it right there. Christians should only be focusing and working towards a what? Gospel presence. Okay? Look, this is a bunch of first century Gnosticism on steroids. Okay? It's never been about the Bible. I came into the kitchen to you the other day and I said, honey, I just had a thought. Okay? The Bible is plainly not a friend of the reformers. Okay? Plainly. All right? They were cut from that Catholic cloth to where it was against the law to have a Bible, I think, or to print it. Okay? Bad things happened to people that tried to print the Bible. And I said to you in the kitchen, I bet you anything the printing revolution, i.e. Johann Gutenberg et al., I bet you anything, and I don't know, but I bet you anything that all occurred shortly before the Protestant Reformation. In other words, copies of the Bible were being put in the hands of everybody and their uncle. Okay? And because I am telling you, the Bible is no friend of the reformers. The Bible, a grammatical interpretation of the Bible, causes extreme problems for Protestant ideology and soteriology. Extreme problems. Okay? Lo and behold, I did a little bit of Googling before I came here, and this whole printing Reformation started, 30, 40, 50 years before the Reformation. I knew it. Okay? I didn't know for sure, but it just makes sense. So, go a little bit further down. Clearly, the goal of Christianity is to experience. It's realm experience. Okay? Now, what's the next heading down there that I have underlined? What do you emphasize? Focus. Emphasis. What is this? This is the Gnostic emphasis hermeneutic. What is it? Okay. Plato believed that the material realm is an illusion. It's shadows of truth. Okay? Well, shadows are true, right? This may be a shadow of reality. Okay? But it's still true.
The shadow is as true as the material object.
No, it's true. An illusion is true. It's an illusion. I think that's a noun, right?
Right.
Okay.
What I'm saying is the concept of shadow is a real thing, just as the material thing that it shadows is a real thing.
Yeah.
The shadow of the bottle is a real thing, just
Right.
as the bottle is a real material thing.
Right. Now, however, and they use, and again, this is the very thesis of Rick Holland's book, Uneclipsing the Sun. Jesus is the sun. All life-giving light comes from the sun. What happens if there's a nuclear holocaust and the whole world gets covered by a cloud? Bad things, right? Okay. You block the sun from your earth, and I suppose everything dies, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you've got the sun, okay, and you've got a building that's eclipsing the sun, and then you've got the shadow. Okay? Plato's complaint against the masses is that the masses, the great unwashed masses, lived in the shadows. They tried to interpret life through the shadows, what the five senses could, perceive. They tried to make sense of life through the visible. And this is exactly what Luther says, bemoans in the Heidelberg Disputation. Okay? My theory is that Gutenberg comes along and starts making the Bible available to everybody and their uncle, and that's a huge problem for the Gnostic Catholics and Protestants. Okay? But at any rate, you've got this problem with interpreting reality through the shadows. Okay? So, what do you want to emphasize? Okay? This is exactly what this little jerk is pertaining to. Okay? Well, I'm really my patience are getting thin with these people. Okay? So, at any rate, this is the emphasis hermeneutic. Okay? Sure, shadows are true, but they don't do you any good. You got to focus on the what? The sun. Okay? Rick Holland, in his book, we've got to uneclipse the sun. Now, what we'll be talking about in volume 2 of The Truth About New Calvinism is how the Reformed reject the new birth on this premise specifically. The new birth is, and the works of the Holy Spirit and the works of a Father are shadows of Jesus Christ. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah, the Trinity's true. Absolutely. But Jesus is the Son, and of course the Father is true, and of course the Holy Spirit is true, but those are secondary truths to the Son. Okay? And the first tenet of New Covenant theology states it specifically. Okay? All reality, ALL, is interpreted through Christocentricity. Okay? Graham Goldsworthy, the contemporary father of redemptive historical hermeneutics, says the exact same thing. I quote him extensively in The Truth About New Calvinism, Volume 1, accordingly. Okay? The Father is true. The Holy Spirit is true. Their works are true. But if you really want to understand reality, who do you focus on? Christ. This gives them a metaphysical license to look at you and say, absolutely, I believe in the new birth. Okay? But emphasis on the new birth eclipses the sun. So it's irrelevant. All other truth but Jesus Christ is irrelevant. Okay. So basically, okay, we have the golden chain of salvation. We have the emphasis. Okay, now, go down to concluding thoughts. Let's skip down because I don't want to do the vital union yet. This guy's got a good point. That guy's got a good point. Peterson has a good point also Peterson keeps us firmly in the soil of the biblical narrative and worldview. Biblical narrative.
Ready.
Okay? Right. What is the biblical narrative? Okay? That is the redemptive meta-narrative. What's a meta-narrative? Meta as in metaphysics. Okay? The gospel narrative or the redemptive narrative interprets all reality. Okay? How does this go? All of life, all of reality is in essence a movie that God wrote before the foundation of the world. Okay?
Like a movie script.
Right. You're just a character in the script. And in the script, you either go to heaven or hell. Everything that happens in your life glorifies God in some way. Okay? Michael Horton talks about this stuff all the time. You ready for this? Is everybody ready? They refer to it all the time as the divine drama.
The Puritans did.
Right, the Puritans did also. I don't know what it's going to take. Is it going to take a movement that says, we're not Christians, we're biblicists, we're something else? I mean, is it going to take burning this whole thing down and starting from scratch? I don't know. But you talk to a lot of atheists and stuff, and see, they connect Christianity with a lot of these ideas. Okay? But at any rate, he says it in here, the quote, biblical narrative, this is the redemptive narrative and worldview. What worldview? That this is all just a narrative. And here's how this works out. Here's why this movement's growing. Okay? Some tragedy comes in the life of people that are dyed in the wool and this stuff. Wow. Look at their faith. They just lost their child. And they're praising God. They're singing, "It's well with my soul." Okay? Which is stupid. Jesus doesn't believe it should be well with your soul that you lost your family. That's just stupid. I don't care how great of a song people think that is. It's stupid. It's a stupid song. Okay? So basically, look at their faith. Wow. Okay? That's not faith. You know, the Apostle Paul said, mourn with those who mourn. You look in the Old Testament about how the Old Testament believers that lived during that time perceived death and this, that, and the other. Okay? What's really going on there is they're handling the tragedy so well because it's just part of a story that God wrote, and they're part of that story. And the story unfolds to the total glory of God. Okay? So they don't really look at it as losing their son, daughter, so on and so forth. They just look at it as the unfolding of a narrative. And I've got quotes from a lot of New Calvinists where they talk about